I never thought a single news broadcast could change everything. There I was, 33 years old, sitting in the corner of our family living room in Austin, Texas, watching my dad Robert raise his bourbon glass to toast my younger brother Marcus for getting promoted to manager at some local insurance company. Dad's words cut through me like a knife. Marcus makes me proud, not like that other one who's just a burden. I had heard those words my entire life, but they still stung. The familiar ache settled in my chest as I watched Mom Linda force a smile from the kitchen doorway. Then CNN's breaking news alert flashed across the screen, and suddenly the bourbon glass in Dad's hand started shaking. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that will make you believe in justice. Trust me, you will not see this twist coming. Growing up in our two-story house with its sprawling backyard, I always knew something was different about how Dad treated Marcus and me. Mom worked as a nurse at the local hospital, while Dad, a retired Navy officer, spent his days reminiscing about his military glory days and planning Marcus's future. Even as a child, I consistently outperformed my brother academically. While Marcus struggled with basic math, I was solving complex equations. While he barely passed English, I was writing award-winning essays for the school newspaper. But none of that mattered to Dad. At family dinners around our oak dining table, I was expected to serve everyone while Marcus sat like a prince. When report cards came home, Dad would beam with pride at Marcus's C average while dismissing my straight A's with a grunt. Girls should focus on finding a good husband and having kids, he would say whenever I mentioned my dreams of joining the military like him. Leave the real careers to the men. I remember being 12 years old watching Dad teach Marcus how to throw a football in our backyard while I sat on the porch steps doing both our homework assignments. Marcus would fumble every throw, but Dad cheered like he was watching the Super Bowl. When I asked if I could join them, Dad laughed and told me to help Mom with the dishes instead. That was the first time I felt that deep ache of rejection, though it would not be the last. Throughout high school, I threw myself into everything I could. I became student body president, captain of the debate team, and valedictorian of my graduating class. I learned martial arts at the local dojo, spending my part-time job money on lessons Dad refused to pay for. Meanwhile, Marcus barely graduated, spending most of his time playing video games and hanging out with friends who were headed nowhere fast. Yet every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every church service, Dad introduced Marcus as his successful son, while I became invisible. The breaking point came during my senior year when I received a full scholarship to West Point Military Academy. I was ecstatic, finally seeing a path to prove myself worthy of Dad's respect. I rushed home with the acceptance letter, my hands trembling with excitement as I handed it to him. Dad read it slowly, his face growing darker with each line. Then he tore it in half and threw it in the trash. "No daughter of mine is going to play soldier," he said coldly. "You will go to the local community college and find yourself a husband." That night, I cried myself to sleep while listening to Dad on the phone, bragging to his brother about how he had saved me from making a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, Marcus announced he wanted to take a gap year to find himself, and Dad immediately agreed, even offering to pay for a trip to Europe. The unfairness of it all burned like acid in my stomach. Mom tried to comfort me with weak excuses about Dad's traditional values, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. She knew it was wrong, but she was too afraid to stand up to him. College became my escape route, though I had to fund it entirely myself. While Marcus lounged around the house for another year before half-heartedly enrolling in community college, I worked double shifts at a local diner to pay tuition at the University of Texas. Dad made it clear that I was on my own financially, even though he continued funding Marcus's every whim. During my sophomore year, he paid $15,000 for Marcus to spend a semester studying abroad in Italy, calling it an investment in his future. When I asked for help buying textbooks, He told me to get a second job. But those 4 years taught me something valuable. I did not need his approval to succeed. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in international relations, maintaining a 4.0 GPA while working 30 hours a week. I wrote my thesis on military strategy and counterterrorism, pouring all my passion for service into academic excellence. The night before graduation, I stayed up practicing my valedictorian speech, imagining Dad's face when he finally saw what I had accomplished. He did not come to my graduation. Neither did Mom or Marcus. Dad claimed he had to work, though I knew he had requested that Saturday off months in advance to attend Marcus's friend's wedding. I walked across that stage alone, accepting my diploma and academic honors, to the cheers of classmates whose families packed the auditorium. Later, I learned that the same day I graduated with highest honors, Dad threw Marcus a surprise party for landing a part-time job at a local auto parts store. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Dad wanted me to disappear, I would disappear, but not in the way he expected. I had already been secretly preparing for months, taking the ASVAB military aptitude test and scoring in the 99th percentile. I had been attending fitness classes, learning everything I could about military life, and researching how to enlist without family consent now that I was 22. The hardest part was changing my name. I legally adopted my maternal grandmother's maiden name Stone and chose Riley as my first name after the military base where my grandfather had served. Clara Thompson would fade away, and Riley Stone would rise from her ashes. I spent weeks gathering all the necessary paperwork, opening new bank accounts, and preparing for a complete break from my past life. The irony was not lost on me that I was using skills Dad had taught me about military precision and planning to execute my escape from his rejection. On my last night in that house, I sat in my childhood bedroom writing a letter I would never send. I poured out 22 years of hurt disappointment and unrequited love onto those pages. I wrote about every birthday he forgot, every achievement he ignored, every time he chose Marcus over me. I wrote about my dreams of making him proud and how his constant rejection had shaped me into someone stronger than he could ever imagine. Then I folded that letter and put it in my desk drawer, knowing someday I might return for it. I left before sunrise with just 2 duffel bags and my grandmother's old jewelry box. As I drove away from Austin in my used Honda Civic, I could see Dad in the kitchen window reading his morning paper and sipping coffee. He had no idea his daughter was disappearing forever. Within hours, I was at the military recruiting station in San Antonio, signing papers to become Private Riley Stone. The recruiting sergeant told me I had tested higher than anyone he had seen in 5 years and fast-tracked me for officer candidate school. When Dad finally noticed I was gone 3 days later, he called my cell phone once. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. If you are going to act like a child and run away, do not bother coming back. We have one less burden to worry about. I saved that voicemail for years, using it as motivation every time training got difficult. Basic training at Fort Benning was the first place I truly felt at home. While other recruits struggled with the physical and mental demands, I thrived. Everything Dad had refused to teach me about leadership and discipline, I learned from drill sergeants who saw potential instead of gender. I graduated at the top of my class and was selected for officer candidate school, then airborne school, then ranger school. Each achievement felt like another step away from the girl who had been called a burden and toward the soldier I was meant to be. My early years as a second lieutenant were spent in various training assignments, but I volunteered for every difficult mission and extra duty I could find. I completed the Special Forces Assessment and Selection course, one of only 3 women to pass that year. I earned my Green Beret and was assigned to a military intelligence unit specializing in counterterrorism operations. Every promotion, every commendation, every successful mission was proof that Dad had been wrong about me. My first deployment to Afghanistan came when I was 25. As a captain leading an intelligence team, I was responsible for gathering information that saved countless American lives. We tracked terrorist networks through the mountains of Kandahar province, often working 18-hour days in 100-degree heat. I learned to speak basic Pashto and Dari, building relationships with local informants who trusted me with information they would never share with male soldiers. My commanding officers noted that I had an unusual ability to gain people's trust quickly, something that served me well in intelligence work. During one mission, my team was ambushed while meeting with a village elder who had promised information about Taliban weapon caches. Rockets and gunfire erupted from 3 directions as we took cover in a mud brick compound. 2 of my soldiers were wounded in the initial attack. While my team provided covering fire, I crawled through enemy fire to drag both men to safety behind a stone wall. Then, I coordinated air support and led a counterattack that eliminated the threat. For that action, I received the Bronze Star Medal with Valor device. The citation read, "Captain Stone's exceptional courage under fire and decisive leadership prevented the loss of American lives and demonstrated the highest traditions of military service." When the medal arrived by mail, I held it in my hands and thought about Dad's words. I was not a burden. I was a hero who had saved lives. My second deployment took me to Iraq, where I led joint operations with Iraqi forces to dismantle insurgent networks in Baghdad. The work was dangerous and complex, requiring me to navigate not just military tactics, but cultural sensitivities and international diplomacy. I learned Arabic and developed sources throughout the city who provided intelligence on roadside bomb operations. My unit prevented over 40 attacks on American convoys during that deployment. It was in Iraq that I truly found my calling in psychological operations and strategic intelligence. I had a gift for understanding how people thought and what motivated them, skills that made me incredibly effective at turning enemy agents and disrupting terrorist communications. My superiors began fast-tracking me for promotion, recognizing that I possessed rare talents that could not be taught in any classroom. Between deployments, I completed my master's degree in strategic intelligence studies at the Army War College. My thesis on counterinsurgency operations in urban environments was classified and became required reading for special operations units. I was promoted to major at 28, lieutenant colonel at 30, and full colonel at 32. Each promotion coming faster than typical career timelines. My personnel file was filled with commendations from generals and foreign government officials who had worked with me on sensitive missions. Throughout those 11 years, I never contacted my family. I occasionally searched their names online and saw Marcus's LinkedIn profile listing various short-term jobs and periods of unemployment. He had married and divorced twice, had 2 children he rarely saw, and was living in Dad's basement again. Meanwhile, my own life was filled with purpose and achievement beyond anything I had imagined as that rejected girl in Texas. I received my 3rd Bronze Star for leading a hostage rescue operation that freed 12 civilians from a terrorist compound in Syria. I earned the Legion of Merit for developing innovative intelligence techniques that were adopted throughout Special Operations Command. My promotion to Brigadier General was announced on a Tuesday morning, making me the youngest female general in Army Special Operations history. The promotion came with assignment to the Pentagon as Deputy Director of Strategic Intelligence, one of the most prestigious positions in military intelligence. But success could not entirely heal the wound Dad had left in my heart. Sometimes, late at night in my quarters, I would wonder if he ever thought about me. I wondered if he was proud of Marcus's latest job, or if he ever regretted his words. I wondered if Mom missed me, or if they had simply moved on as if I had never existed. Those thoughts would keep me awake until I reminded myself that I had found my real family in the soldiers who served beside me, and the mission that gave my life meaning. Which brings us back to that evening in Austin, sitting in the corner of our family living room like a ghost from the past. I had driven down from Fort Hood where I was visiting a former unit before my new assignment to the Pentagon. Something had pulled me back to that house, perhaps a need for closure, or maybe just curiosity about how my family was surviving without their burden. I had used my security clearance access to confirm the address was still the same and that all three of them still lived there. Dad looked older, grayer, his Navy pride still evident in his posture, but his face marked by years of disappointment. Mom had aged too. Her nurse's uniform replaced by a tired cardigan, and the spark I remembered from my childhood completely gone. And Marcus. Well, Marcus looked exactly like what he had always been. A 30-year-old man who had never lived up to even modest expectations, now celebrating a middle management position like he had won the lottery. The house felt smaller than I remembered. Shabbier. The furniture was the same, but worn down by time and neglect. Family photos covered the mantel, all featuring the three of them at various holidays and celebrations. Not a single picture included me, as if I had been systematically erased from family history. Even my high school graduation photo was gone, replaced by one of Marcus in his community college cap and gown. I had arrived 2 hours earlier, simply knocking on the front door and watching Dad's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something approaching fear. "Clara," he had whispered as if seeing a ghost. I nodded and asked if I could come in, explaining that I was in town and wanted to see them. He let me in reluctantly, his eyes darting around as if looking for escape routes. Mom had gasped and started crying when she saw me, her hands shaking as she reached out, then pulled back, unsure if she was allowed to touch me. Marcus arrived an hour later, home from his new job with news of his promotion. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting in my old corner spot, his mouth falling open in shock. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice smaller than I remembered. "We tried to find you." He lied, and we all knew it. There had been no missing person report, no private investigator, no family meetings about their lost daughter. I had simply been written off as dramatically as Dad had torn up my West Point acceptance letter. The conversation had been stilted, awkward. They asked surface questions about my life, but I gave only vague answers. I told them I had been serving my country, that I had found success and happiness, but I did not elaborate. Something in me wanted to reveal everything, to show them my uniform and medals, to force Dad to confront his massive mistake. But another part of me, the stronger part, wanted to see how long they could go on pretending they had been good parents who deserved to know about my achievements. Dad poured himself that bourbon and launched into his toast for Marcus, the same dismissive words he had used my entire childhood. I felt the old familiar sting, but it was different now. His words could not hurt me anymore because I knew my worth. I had proven it to myself and to the world in ways he could never understand. As he spoke about burdens and disappointment, I almost smiled, knowing that everything was about to change. Then CNN's breaking news music played from the television mounted on the wall behind Dad's chair. The anchor's serious voice cut through his speech. "This is CNN breaking news. We have just received word that the Army has announced the promotion of Colonel Riley Stone to Brigadier General, making her at 33, the youngest female general in Army Special Operations history. General Stone has served with distinction in multiple combat deployments and is being recognized for her exceptional leadership in counterterrorism operations." Dad's bourbon glass trembled in his hand. Marcus went pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. They all turned to look at the television, then at me, then back at the television where my official military photograph was displayed on screen. In that photo, I wore my dress blue uniform with ribbons covering the left side of my chest, my colonel's insignia gleaming on my collar, my expression confident and proud. The anchor continued. "General Stone's promotion comes with assignment to the Pentagon as Deputy Director of Strategic Intelligence. Army Chief of Staff General Williams called her one of the finest officers of her generation, and praised her innovative approaches to modern warfare challenges. Dad set his bourbon glass down with shaking hands, the amber liquid sloshing over the rim. His face had gone completely white. Marcus stared at me like I had materialized from another dimension. Mom was crying openly now, her hands pressed to her mouth. The silence stretched for what felt like forever, before Dad finally spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Riley Stone. That's you?" I stood up slowly, smoothing down my civilian clothes, and looked directly into his eyes for the first time in 11 years. "Yes, Dad. That's me. I'm Riley Stone." My voice was calm, steady, carrying the authority I had learned commanding soldiers in combat zones around the world. "I'm that burden you were so eager to get rid of. Except I wasn't a burden at all. I was just a daughter who wanted her father to believe in her." The words hung in the air like smoke. Dad's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Marcus slumped into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. Mom walked toward me, hesitantly, tears streaming down her face. "Clara, Riley, she stammered, unable to form complete sentences. For the first time in my life, I was watching my family face the consequences of their choices. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photos I had taken at my promotion ceremony the week before. I showed them pictures of me shaking hands with the Secretary of the Army, surrounded by fellow generals and senior officials. I showed them my Bronze Stars, my Purple Heart, my Ranger Tab, my Special Forces qualification badge. Each image was another piece of evidence that they had thrown away something precious. 11 years, I said quietly. 11 years I served in silence while you all went on with your lives pretending I never existed. I've led soldiers in combat, saved American lives, and received the highest honors my country can give. And not once did any of you wonder if maybe you had made a mistake." Marcus finally looked up, tears in his eyes. "We did look for you," he said weakly. "We tried." I pulled out my old phone, the one I had kept all these years, and played Dad's voicemail from 11 years ago. "If you are going to act like a child and run away, do not bother coming back. We have one less burden to worry about." The sound of his own voice, his own words, seemed to physically strike Dad. He aged 10 years in that moment, his shoulders sagging under the weight of what he had done. I didn't mean..." He started, then stopped. We both knew he had meant every word. But here's the thing about healing. It does not require the other person to earn your forgiveness. I had spent 11 years learning who I was without their approval, building a life of purpose and meaning that had nothing to do with the man who had called me a burden. I had found my real family in the soldiers who trusted me with their lives, and the mission that gave me reason to get up every morning. Their rejection had forced me to become someone stronger than I ever would have been with their acceptance. "I forgave you a long time ago," I told Dad, and meant it. "Not because you deserved it, but because holding on to that anger was the only burden I was carrying. I came here tonight to tell you that I turned out just fine, despite everything you did to convince me I wouldn't. Your opinion stopped mattering to me the day I learned my worth from people who actually mattered." I hugged Mom goodbye, shook Marcus's hand, and walked past Dad without another word. As I reached the front door, I heard him call my name, his voice broken and desperate. I turned back one last time and saw him standing there with tears on his face, finally understanding what he had lost. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. "I should have said that 11 years ago." I nodded once and stepped out into the Texas night air, breathing deeply and feeling lighter than I had in years. Sometimes the greatest victory is not making someone else lose, but simply walking away with your head held high. Sometimes the family that raises you is not the family that sees you. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to find the place where you truly belong. I drove back to my hotel that night thinking about the scared, rejected girl I used to be and the confident woman I had become. Dad's words could never hurt me again because I had learned something he would never understand. Your worth is not determined by the people who fail to see it. It is determined by what you choose to do when they look away. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to prove your worth to someone who doubted you? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the darkest moments. Remember, sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up teaching us exactly who we are meant to become. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it. Until next time, keep believing in yourself even when others don't.